I don't want to get into detail. Let me first mention that this disease was first identified in Italy in 1878. And it's called Asian flu. It's associated with 1996 outbreak in Hong Kong. However, this strain was primarily isolated from poultry farm of Scotland in 1959. Okay? But because of the rapid assortment ability, the disease has gone north of evolution and now it's spread into many parts of the world. And it's a major risk now. It is a major risk to the wild and domesticated animals, the chicken industries, and also to, as I said, it can inflict pandemic influenza once it induces human transmission. So far, the human-to-human transmission of H5N1 is rare. The transmission cycle is very complicated. This virus can be maintained, can spread among simply wild microturbulence. This virus can also maintained, can spread simply among wild local birds. It can also be maintained and can spread among the backyard farms or farms with very poor biosecurity measures. And the disease can also jump the boundary from those different communities by contamination of the environment, for example, water sources. Okay? And it can again be transmitted into humans. So in order to understand the spread of this avian influenza, you need to understand the disease dynamics in two scales. You have to understand the local dynamics. You want to understand the local dynamics involve infections and cross-contamination of domesticated birds, local poultry industry, and the temporary migratory birds. But you also have to understand the global dynamics, or the local dynamics that involve the long-range transportation of industrial materials and poultry, as well as the long-term bird migration. So to understand bird migration alone, this is very complicated. As you can imagine, this major biological phenomena. Every year, billions of birds migrate along 8 different overlapping corridors. And each typical migration process involves different phases of biological activities and signalities, including wintering, including summer migration, breeding, maturation, and autumn migration again. Okay? And also, the migration route can involve lots of major stopovers. And during the stopovers, you can see lots of local poultry industries as well. So here's the major migratory birds of migratory birds. And now we have, if you think that bird migration has a long history, and what's surprising, there are not too many mathematical models to understand the transmission of this migratory bird by considering the birds, the migration, and the seasonality. There is now a model which is going to appear very soon in the Royal Society interface. And what is good about the study of the bird flu with avian influenza is the convergence of the mathematical techniques to understand the dynamics of this kind of model. What is also important is the variability of satellite tracking data, so that this data can be used to parameterize the model and to validate the model. Okay, so there are some process now of validating the model, and once the model is validated, then we can use the validated model to do scenario analysis. One of the scenario analysis is about the impact of the disease-induced mortality. Assume, and that's the case in Asia now, the H5N1 became endemic in certain regions of the world. So how is H5N1 induced mortality on the birds going to affect the population of certain species of birds? And this is one of the simulations which will be published very soon. And this also can be used for the optimal allocation of limited resources. So this is a big issue by World Health Organization and other major health organizations. You have very limited resources, and H5N1 became a major threat. So how you're going to use the resources, whether you're going to use the limited resources to control the epidemic of the disease, of those stop over during the spring migration, or you spend most of the resources to control the epidemic during the fall migration. The answer, building on this integration of model and satellite tracking, really depends on the goal, whether it's long-term goal or short-term goal. And your answer is probably not necessarily what the politician would like. The answer to the question is completely different depending on your long-term or short-term goal. I don't want to go into details. How's it relevant to Canada? So this is one particular bird, blossom pintail. It's a typical North American bird. Most of them spend the winter in California. When spring comes, they fly to Alaska along the coastline. Some of them came to Canada, and the environment condition, if the environment condition is good, they're going to stay in Canada. Otherwise, they're going to fly also to Alaska. When they arrive in Alaska, spend a long summer season down there, they can be infected because there are lots of birds coming from Asia regions. Those birds can be infected and can bring the virus back to North America during the fall migration. So how to build on the previous integration of modeling and satellite tracking data and the understanding of the birds to analyze the risk of importation by migratory birds. It's something we are trying to understand. Now, how this relates to Ontario? How especially relate to this particular region in Niagara? We had a workshop last August with Ontario Egg Farms, and they had a big concern. The Ontario Egg Farm claimed in Ontario, the chicken industry is highly regulated, and they can control bird flu outbreak within hours, literally. And they're very concerned about, for example, backyard activities. In many municipalities in Ontario, and bylaw does permit backyard chicken farming activities. And disease introduced into the region where there are lots of backyard activities, and the risk could be substantial. This is some of the issues the Ontario chicken industry is very much concerned, and we are going to change leading a group of people working with the poultry industry, trying to get the data, and try also to understand the interested. Well, I have touched a little bit on the environmental impact on disease spread. That's really related to how change the migratory patterns of birds. And now I come to top two priority of the project, predicting the Lyme disease spread in Canada. Lyme disease is a tick-borne disease. It involves the life cycle of the ticks and some animal hosts. In this particular case, deer and rodents, for example. So the tick can be infected if the tick bite on animal hosts, and animal hosts can also be infected if the tick bite, if the infected tick bites it. And Lyme disease now is an issue in North America, and in Canada. Here's a picture of the Lyme disease spread in Ontario, in Quebec, in Atlantic region, and in the central part of Canada. And this spread is really dependent on the tick population, and the habitat suitability for ticks is changing, especially when the environment and climate change. His prediction by Nick Oldham from the University of Montreal and from Public Health Agency of Canada about the spread of the ticks across Canada is about this year. This is 2020. The next panel is 2050, and then 2050. You can see the tick-borne population expanding very quickly with the climate